I have a bit of a story to share. I remember waking up one morning and seeing the trailer for Sonic Dream Team. Everybody was pretty outraged to hear that this promising game is exclusive to Apple. While I think it is kinda stupid of them to do that, however, that's why I am not angry. If anything, I was more angry at the fact that it wasn't a new Knights game. I am angry because that's a missed opportunity. Like, come on, the premise of the game was right there. You had an opportunity and you could have seized it. Something tells me that there's a Sonic Shuffle situation where there was some Knights involvement early in development, but got set to the side. Don't quote me on this. This is just some weird conspiracy theory I have. I bring this up because, like I said, Knights was shifted to the side, only really being more involved in crossover and spin-off games, mostly Sonic spin-off games. This is editing stage Darnius here. This video was recorded during the night of the Game Awards, and this is before I found out Sega was reviving like a whole bunch of their classic franchises and even some of the ones they have neglected. But that doesn't excuse the fact that there are still some franchises without any new games announced. Specifically Knights, because Knights is always getting the short end of the stick apparently, but I would like to say this is the part where I would have complained about Sega only acknowledging their more popular franchises. Yeah. This is all I'm gonna say here. Basically, Space Channel 5 is another one of Sega's neglected franchises. Now granted, this franchise has been getting more treatment from Sega this era. However, there is still a long, and I mean long gap between games that I will get to explaining later. As for my personal experience, I remember watching my brother try this game on the Dreamcast collection on an Xbox 360. We only saw as far as the first level and that was it. I do recognize Ulala from Sega All-Stars Racing, but so do other people I know that like Sonic games and have played all of the spin-off games involving crossover characters. That's the gist of most of these franchises. And Space Channel 5 wasn't even made by Sonic Team, the studio where most of their franchises come from. However, we are not going to sit around and mope on how Sega likes to do more franchise neglect than Nintendo. We are going to talk about that Space Cat over there. So let's do that. Let us start off with the creation of the series overall. It's sometime in the Dreamcast era, and racing game developer Tetsuya Mitsugishi was told by Sega to create a game that would appeal to casual female players. He had no clue what would appeal to such a market and thought girls didn't play video games. Eventually, he found that female players liked to play puzzle games. He came up with an idea to combine music and video games, which works because he had experiences with nightclubs and street parades. He had so many inspirations from Russian artist Vasily Kandinsky to Peter Gabriel and even Michael Jackson, the latter being an amusing piece of foreshadowing, which you will all see eventually. Production was handled by Sega AM9 and Team Andromeda of Panzer Dragoon and Sonic Film. Development took nearly 2 years since they started with 10 people and eventually upgraded to 27. Mitsugishi directed alongside Takashi Yuta and became Mitsugishi's first time creating a game for consoles. He even said the Dreamcast made it possible to create higher quality music than arcade machines. He took advantage of the technical capabilities to include interactivity with the music, which made development difficult to balance the gameplay due to this focus on rhythm. When designing the game, Mitsuguchi said the game was cool, but not very fun. What he means is that it really boiled down to pressing the buttons in time with the music. So he took some inspiration from Stomp, a rhythm troupe known for using movement as a source of percussion, specifically a routine where the audience had to copy their clapping, with their clapping getting more complex each time. Mitsuguchi wanted to incorporate this into the game. Matching with the music and story, for the chew mechanic, they made it to where Ulala never really actually kills anybody to make it more approachable. Mitsuguchi laid out the cycle of effort and reward for the mechanic in a design document. They took out the effects so the team could focus on a simplified version. The name Chew came from a recording session where they struggled to pronounce it, so it was altered into what it's called now. In case you're wondering, it was originally just Shoot. As for visuals, the game used CGI backgrounds with the polygonal models. It took up so much space that they had to cut some comedic segments out of the final game. No! I refuse to let storage space take out my funny moments. Where is my Space Channel 5 funny moments? They didn't have a main character yet, so a basic man was used for a prototype demo of the game. There was a retro future aesthetic that was used for the demo of the game, and it managed to become the overall motif for the game. For the characters, there were a lot of inspirations from Star Wars to Monty Python. Mitsuguchi took a liking to orchestral music in a science fiction setting. Ulala in particular was the biggest challenge of them all. They had to alter her design numerous times because they wanted to appeal to both male and female gamers. Jake Kasdal was a model artist on the team and stated that Barbarella was their main inspiration for Ulala. He also stated they continued to develop the style, and the staff found a lot of ridiculous designs to be pretty funny. As for music, Naofumi Hayata and Kenichi Takoi from Wavemaster composed the music for the game, where the former also became the sound director for the game. They used big band jazz of the 50s and 60s as inspiration, and even techno and trance music as well. Hayata found all of the genres and fitting the OST difficult, and it's estimated that over an hour of recorded music was used. What made it more difficult was that the use of concepts and completed gameplay created more work for the team. If you guys know the series, then you guys should know Mexican Flyer, the main theme of the Space Channel 5 series. That is not an original piece. It is an obscure piece made by Ken Woodman, who was shocked that somebody wanted to use their piece for the game. The obscurity of the song made it harder to get the rights to, which, yeah, they did, but it was still difficult. The ending theme, Palapaya, had recorded vocals of the staff from Wavemaster. Eventually, an album was published on February 21st, 2000. Sega never gave support for the game's voice acting, so most of the voice cast comprised of staff members. Some examples are Sega producer Miniko Okamura's Ulala and game producer Takashi Yuda's Fuse. It worked itself out because they know how the characters should be portrayed. However, this led to some recording sessions that were so stressful that Okamura even broke down in tears. However, they did get some actual VAs on the team, those being Sho Hayami as Jaguar and Kaida as Pudding, respectively. As for English voice actors, TV personality Apollo Smile was brought on to voice Ulala. Even Michael Jackson appeared in the game as Space Michael. He played a near-complete demo of the game and said he really liked it, and asked if he could cameo. He was a last-minute addition to the game, however, as the game was a month away from completion. So they just made him his own model and he did a couple of voice lines. The game was announced at the Tokyo Game Show in September 1999. It was released in December of that year in Japan. The US version dropped around June 4th, 2000, and October 8th that same year. The game received overall positive reviews, praising the game for its crazy visuals, but criticizing the game for its lack of content and simplified gameplay. As for sales, it unfortunately didn't do so well, only selling 93,600 units in Japan. Despite this, the staff declared it a success due to it appealing to hardcore and casual audiences. However, Mitsuguchi himself thought it failed commercially. When Sega went third party, the game was ported to PS2 in 2002, but nowadays it's considered very rare. Even a Game Boy Advance remake was made, but let's not really talk about that because it's not that good according to everyone. What we do need to talk about is the actual game itself. So let's do that. There is no better way to start talking about the game than summarizing the story. Basically, Space Channel 5 has been declining in ratings. In a last-ditch effort to regain ratings, Fuse sends Ulala to report an invasion of aliens known as the Morolians. These Morolians are forcing people at a spaceport to dance and get captured. Ulala gets down and busts a move to free them, and everything's going well until Pudding pulls up. After a dance battle, Ulala is victorious and they continue, then they go up against Coco Tapioca. And after another dance battle, Ulala is once again victorious. In Report 2, she shows up to a luxury spacecraft and she begins by rescuing the diva. Afterwards, they are ambushed by the space pirates, their leader being known as Jaguar, and she takes another W, with Jaguar taking an interest in Ulala's dance capabilities. I don't know about you, Jaguar, that sounds kinda sus. After that encounter, they fight another Morolian robot. Ulala wins and makes the ratings flung to the moon. In Report 3, it is found that the secret base of the Morolians was found on an asteroid belt. Ulala races against other reporters to get to the scoop first. She had to refight Pudding and encountered new reporters such as Shinichiro Tachibana and 88 Man. 88 Man! Jaguar returns and starts blasting meteors while Ulala deals with his space pirate gang. This gives Pudding the advantage but then gets hypnotized by the Marolians. After freeing Pudding from their control, they encounter the final dance bot, Marolian Monroe, who attacks from the comfort of their own monitor screen. Basically, this robot uses Twitter, I don't know. However, this robot splits apart into two robots and they overpower Ulala. Jaguar comes to the rescue and they manage to take down the strongest dance bot that has the mentality of a Twitter user. It turns out that the Marolians are under control by somebody, and they shoot down a TV to free them. They escape the base as it goes Black Kazooie, and they find from Jaguar that the hypnotizing radar comes from Space Channel 5's own HQ. In the last report, they make it to the Space Channel 5 studio, and it turns out that their chief Blank is behind this. After taunting her and refusing to elaborate further like a Chad, he leaves and bombards the game with a massive wave of Marolians, and they rescue the leader known as I'm sorry. Sounds so funny. A lot of these Marolian names are really funny. After making it to the elevator, Blank reveals that reporters should share his vision and truth is like a disease. He then deploys Evillah, the ultimate reporter, who is created to outdo Ulala but is ironically outdone by Ulala. After that, the gang get on their hovercraft to confront Blank and the giant Evillah. However, the giant robot begins to knock down Pudding and Jaguar, and then Ulala after the sound system gets cut off. However, Jaguar saves her. With this support, Ulala takes down the giant Evillah, and its head causes Blank to become Blank TV, which creates the blank dimension for Blank and Ulala to fight on. With the crowd support, the dimension is broken and they form a power beam from the crowd, with Blank ranting on how much the ratings have skyrocketed and the truth is a disease. Again, they use this beam to send Blank to the Shadow Realm saying he'll be back. Which is a lie, by the way. We will see how well this line has aged. Ulala then concludes her report and they start walking to the edge of the galaxy. Yeah, this is a pretty insane, fast-paced story for this game. Granted, there are only 4 levels here, so you could do so much. I did think the plot twist of Blank trying to brainwash everyone is pretty interesting. There was some foreshadowing that this may be the case, but it just really boils down to, haha, our main villain is a corrupt CEO. We haven't seen that been done before. I also like how well the characters are established. Ulala displays her confidence throughout each report and is clearly passionate about dancing. Putting snobbiness and obnoxious personality makes her a perfect foil to Ulala. As a teen idol, she clearly acts like a diva. Jaguar is my favorite of these characters in this cast. While he does have an egotistical side, he shows respect to his rivals and provides help for them when needed. Fitting, as his space pirate gang is set to seek the truth. There's actually a lot of lore because he's also the same person who saves a young Ulala in the game's opening cutscene. Blank is, as you may have guessed, my least favorite, being the corrupt CEO cliche that's really in for his own gang. While being the twist villain of sorts, it doesn't make him any less generic. Enough of this story and characters mumbo jumbo, how about that gameplay? The gameplay is pretty simple. Copy the button combinations, A shoots at Marolians, and B rescues hostages. However, what is interesting is that the scenarios change depending on your performance. Fuse will communicate with you on what to do and how well you're performing. Getting combinations correct will get you higher ratings, and you will need those ratings to progress in the game. Rescuing hostages will add them to your group as you strut in the level. They even get added to bios once you rescue them. Getting combinations incorrect will result in losing hearts and ratings, and you will get a game over when you lose all of your hearts. Which also leads to the game's difficulty. Despite the simple premise, you do have to coincide the button combinations with the rhythm, which means not only you have to repeat the buttons, but you also have to do it in the same way, which will leave players who go in blind to mess up a lot. What makes this game even more difficult is that some scenarios in the later have new ways of memorizing combinations, like the giant Evillah fight, having you press the opposite directional buttons. Speaking of fights, you will have rival battles partway through the level, and the boss at the end of each one. Pudding and Jaguar being rival reporters you must face, and Evillah being a manufactured rival reporter. While the end-level bosses start off simple, later ones, especially the final battle, have new mechanics. When you beat the game, all you really get is an extra mode. It's like an extra mode in the Kirby games, but even worse. This one is just the same thing, except like a few new things, but it's still just the same game. As for music, the big band jazz surprisingly works well for the game and fits the retro future theme. I really like all of the endgame pieces, especially the a cappella Mexican flyer during the final blank fight. Then the cherry on top being Palapaya, the ending credits theme. The orchestra and vocals give it a beautifully relaxing tone to cap off the game. It does its job really well as a fast-paced rhythm game. Despite its high praise, it did end up being a commercial failure. Well, Sega actually allowed them to still make a sequel for this game. Now, this is the game I know the series by. They actually began working on a sequel to this game shortly after the first release. However, they postponed the game for when the sales of the Western version came in. Mizuguchi found the game much easier to produce due to mainly being from experience. United Game Artists returned to develop the game, and all of the team from the last game returned. It took 2 years this time to develop the game. This also ended up being Mizuguchi's final game before leaving Sega to join Q Entertainment. They retained the retro future theme and came up with several different story ideas, one of them being a censorship group with the leader wanting to conquer the galaxy. They even wanted to bring back Blank from the last game, but it was scrapped so they could create a new villain. The environments were made in the game's engine as opposed to it being pre-rendered, with Mizuguchi himself saying the latter was difficult to do. They added more content to the game as a response to the criticism of the first game. As for voice acting, the game's staff and the other voice actors included reprised all their roles. Michael Jackson reprised his Space Michael due to his larger role in the game's story. Apollo Smile also reprised her role as Ulala, but Sumali Montana was replaced by Larissa Murray as Pudding. The same goes for Jeff Kramer's Jaguar, who was replaced by Tom Clark Hill. Naofumi Hataya and Kenichi Takoi, I apologize for butchering that, returned to compose for this game, with Tomoya Otani of Sonic fame and Mariko Nanba as new members. Nanba was brought aboard later in development, and he was overwhelmed by the process. They stuck to big band jazz as the style of the game's soundtrack. Recording took a whole year to create as it's the core of the gameplay. Otani even had to take a sick week due to stomach issues. A new addition to the game were instrument battles for rival characters. This turned out to be a difficult feature to implement. There was a percussion segment that took a while to create. It would eventually become the Pine Battle in Report 3. Hayata composed a new ending to the game called This Is My Happiness, with the lyrics written by Tomoko Sasaki. Speaking of lyrics, the songs that contained lyrics were difficult for localizers, as they needed to match with the rhythm of each song. The soundtrack to the game did end up getting albums. There were 2 albums called Chew and Hey, which is the game's standard soundtrack, but the game also got 2 remix albums called the Uki Uki Nonstop Megamix and Moji Moji Can't Stop Megamix. These albums also contain short audio plays which are pretty much reusing voice lines from the game while recording some random Japanese man. My favorite being Purge responding to a phone call. The game was announced in October 2001 at the Tokyo Game Show for both Dreamcast and PS2. The game was eventually released in Japan on February 14, 2002. Europe had a bit of trouble with the game. While it did release mainland on February 13, 2003, the UK and Ireland releases were cancelled due to abuse allegations from Michael Jackson surfacing around this time. The US only got the game as a special edition on November 18, 2003 that contained the first game as well. The game received positive reviews from critics praising the visuals, music, and improvements from the first game's gameplay. The game sold better as well, selling 50,000 copies during its first week, with Japan selling 150,000. The game got a re-release on Sega's Dreamcast collection on Windows and the 360 February 12, 2011. The game was also separately released on the 360 and PS3 that same year. The game got a Steam re-release but received a patch in 2014 for technical problems. Alright, let's take a look at this game to see why people like it more than the first. Starting with the story, it begins with Jaguar investigating a strange area. However, a mysterious figure appears and catches him lacking. Later on, a mysterious troupe of dancers invade a spaceport of people, forcing them to dance and capture them. Report 1 begins with Ulala stepping into the scene and encountering the perpetrators, their leader being known as Shadow. Man, if I had a nickel for every time Sega had a game under their belt with an antagonist named Shadow, I would have 3 nickels. Yes, 3, not 2. Don't forget the time Yuji Naka made a game about the 2003 version of Astro Boy. Anyways, after Ulala outdoes Shadow in a dance battle, he decides to spawn robots and hostages. After she succeeds shooting down robots and rescuing hostages, Shadow introduces the troupe as the Rhythm Rogues, or the Adoridon in the Japanese version. After one last dance battle, they go to the Lookout Dome where Shadow introduces the real leader and they activate the singing robots Kin, Kon, and Khan. Throughout the battle, the leader introduces himself as Purge and his plan to make the whole galaxy dance. Eventually, Ulala tramps over the robots. Twice. And Purge notes that
the party's just begun.
In Report 2, we get introduced to a new major character, President Peace, who is known for singing his iconic song, but is interrupted and attacked by a plant. Purge comes on and announces that he kidnapped the president. You could have made that a little more subtle. Why do you have to broadcast your little funny, haha, get nay-nayed, we're doing a little bit of tomfoolery here messages out in public? You know how many heads you're going to turn with that? Ulala arrives at the space park and he encounters Shadow on the conveyor and they dance. Shadow then hijacks the platform and starts bringing in hostages who were band kids. Afterwards, they enter another room where more kids and their instructor are melting. They manage to free the rest of the school band and we get a band kid version of the main theme, which is actually pretty funny. Later on, she runs into Pudding, who now has a guitar, which prompts Ulala to enter a guitar battle with her where Ulala just conveniently has a guitar. She is successful but runs into the bird mistress. She frees her and other bird watchers who shouldn't really be having any binoculars because the birds are just right there. They make it to the greenhouse and run into a strange plant with the president trapped in it. She tries to free him by shooting at all of the plant's defenses, eventually revealing the waltz robot Bonpirin. Shadow joins in once more and engages Ulala in a waltz battle. Ulala prevails and frees the president, who sings his song, only for Shadow to capture the president and teleport away, leaving Ulala flabbergasted. In Report 3, Purge announces he is holding the president under ransom for 6 trillion space dollars. Yeah, something tells me that Purge is way more of a threat than the corrupt CEO. This catches the attention of many different space channel stations, including Ulala and Pudding. This is also the reveal of a new member of Space Channel 5, Noise. No, wait, not that noise, no, wait! However, this also catches the eye of the space police led by Pine. She orders Channel 5 to back off, but they persist and they engage in a battle. Eventually, Pine is revealed along with her assistants, then they get into a drum battle. Ulala and Noise prevail and the space police go away, but this victory is short-lived, since Space Michael sends a transmission saying robots are invading Channel 5's headquarters. They rush back after hearing this news. In Report 4, it is revealed multiple space channels were attacked by the Rhythm Rogues for their antennas, which Purge elaborates on as he chimes in. It begins with the Channel 5 trio rushing to the headquarters as they get attacked by multiple robots on their way. They manage to take them out and rescue the rescue team on their way. They make it to the headquarters and take out robots along with rescuing even more of their members, which includes cheerleaders. I'll be real. Why do they even have cheerleaders? What are they gonna do? Encourage reporters to do their job? Like, their jobs are already exciting as is. I don't know. I have literally no idea. Afterwards, Ulala slides down to a closing door leading to a new room. She finds Space Michael, who was captured by Shadow, which prompts them to engage in another dance battle that consists of Michael Jackson's dance moves. They even end it with a reference to his songs too. However, once Ulala prevails, something weird happens with Shadow. I wonder who that could be. No time to explain, however, since Space Michael is freed and they do more of his dance moves. They get to the core where they encounter Purge, where he reveals to take the Space Channel 5 antenna. He even introduces the president, who is captured in a robot. Obviously they are not having that and they engage in a battle. He even uses the president carrier as a literal meat shield, which is kind of dark. Eventually Purge's vehicle and the carrier merge into Purge the King. Wait a minute. Using the president's voice to shout, We take control of Space Michael and have a sing-off. As we progress, more members of Channel 5 come in. Eventually, we seemingly back Purge to a corner and try to fire a beam at him. Purge surprisingly deflects it and hits Fuse's ship instead, and he dies. I'm not kidding. That ship goes kablooey. Bam! Kaboom! He then teleports away, stealing their antenna. What follows is a chaotic escape from the exploding Space Channel 5 studio. After that, it just goes kaboom with Fuse still in there. Like, I guess the little submarine type ship already went kablooey, but yeah, there is absolutely no way Fuse is coming back from that. There is absolutely no way that he will show up randomly. In Report 5, multiple reporters get a transmission from Pine, which prompts Ulala and Space Michael to go to Purge's base, with Pudding and following suit. They get spotted and run into multiple rooms with traps. However, they fall into a trapdoor anyway. Surrounded by several robots, they manage to fend them off and move onward, only to run into Shadow with his buff bots as he challenges our heroes. What culminates is a combination of all the rival battles turned into a battle of the bands. Our heroes win, but Shadow begins to flicker again. It turns out that Jaguar is Shadow. Purge catches on to this and resets him back to Shadow. He then invites the game to a game of which one is the real one. Ulala uses her hay beam on the real Shadow to free Jaguar. She succeeds and Jaguar is rescued, and he explains that Purge is using the antennas to fire a beam that make everyone dance. They then ride on an elevator to take them up to where Purge is. In Report 6, it begins with the
TV show!
And he drops the hardest theme song for a reality show ever. He takes a look at the first feature being our main reporters. They confront Purge and make their way to his stage, fending off multiple robots he sends to battle. They make it, but only Ulala could enter as his friends are blocked off by an invisible wall. Purge then reveals his drip for dancing and they engage in a dance battle, with a meter filling up as they dance. Once it is full, he reveals President Peace again, who is still captive. He then activates Dance Dimension X along with his great form. The dimension deafens and blocks off anybody from supporting her, which makes Ulala alone with this giant figure. She becomes distressed as she dodges the many shots Purge fires at her, but he eventually gets some hits on her and she goes down. Purge continues to dance as he shuts down Channel 5. Meanwhile, in the afterlife, a mysterious voice calls out to her to get up. After some clapping that lets her friend's face into existence, I'm not kidding, all they do is... which makes Ulala realize, hey, wait a minute, I never lose. Then she's sprung back to life and changed the dance dimension. She begins deflecting Purge's shots and eventually frees the president from Purge the Great. Peace then drops a bar so fire that the dance dimension collapses and Purge the Great along with it, being converted into energy. Fuse comes back to life and tells Ulala to gather the energy of everybody to repel the groove gun.
Dance yourselves to hell, see if I care!
Once the beams fire, getting the final 3 choose right will not only repel Purge's beam, but also send him to the Shadow Realm. Getting it wrong will cut the black and skip straight to the credits. Okay, there was some dialogue where Fuse gets frustrated that they were going to end the game off amazingly, which... that just makes the funniest bad ending in gaming history. Back to the ending, Ulala makes one final report with another walk across the galaxy. Okay. I'll be honest, not only the story is more insane than the first one, it's also a massive improvement over the first one. While the first one didn't really have a bad story, it's just that the second game takes what the first game did and dials it to 11. There are clear high stakes as the Rhythm Rogues keep terrorizing the galaxy and building up to Purge's grand plan. Speaking of which, I find Purge to be a better antagonist than Blank. He establishes himself as a threat and he partakes in the plot a lot more. He even studies his enemy to know what their weaknesses are, and he can use said weaknesses against them. I like how they built up the mystery of what he's planning too, using key elements of his plan as the main source to rescue or protect in each level. The only flaw I could really find is the whole Jaguar Shadow thing. Considering the cutscene before Report 1 literally starts with the opening cutscene before cutting the Shadow, the fact that Shadow uses all of Jaguar's animations, yeah, it's really easy to figure out that they're the same. The fact that you show Jaguar then Shadow afterwards makes it a little easier for people to draw draw connections where people can easily predict where it's going to go with this mystery. What helps carry the story is the voice acting. The voice actors fit their characters and they all put a lot of energy into the performances. My favorite of these performers is Tom Clark Hill as Jaguar and Shadow. He just does a really good job portraying the slight arrogance that Shadow would give off, while he gives off the maturity and charisma of Jaguar.
We have your great president! Don't you dare try to stop us!
Waltz battle!
Purge is using the antennas he stole from each of the space broadcasting stations to complete a fearsome ballistic groove gun. If we don't hurry, the whole Milky Way will be in danger!
There was a lot of effort put into the story and the voice cast. How about that gameplay though? The gameplay is pretty much the same, but there is a lot more polish to it. Rescuing hostages in the game has been refined to the hay mechanic. Chu has been now known to exclusively shoot at robots. There is a new addition of holding down buttons for rhythm. There are new instrument battles where you would mash down to play the instrument. You can press other directions for the sake of style. Ratings still change during performances if View still comments on Ulala's performance. However, instead of needing ratings to progress, they now unlock costumes for Ulala to wear. They extend from outfits to straight up using character models. When you beat the game, you unlock an extra mode like the last game where you can rescue new hostages and fight against new versions of every rival and boss, which is still the same character except with a different name. I will say this, however, I'm glad they took the effort to bring the voice actors in and re-record lines with these names changes. That's a nice detail, I guess. As for visuals, the transition to pre-rendered backgrounds to in-game environments in the game's engine works a lot better here. The models even look great too, even if this is a Dreamcast game. It probably has something to do with the use of lighting and how it helps with the futuristic environments. Speaking of environments, there are many new locales for the game. We go through a national park, the inside of the Space Channel 5 studio, or at least a more expansive, comprehensive version of the Space Channel 5 studio, and Purge's base. The designs of the new characters are very unique, especially with the rhythm rogues. I like the zigzags on their heads and circular shapes. I especially like Purge's design. He has an interesting spin on the mad scientist motif. I forgot to mention Ulala's design in the last segment, but notice how the color of her outfit in both games match the Dreamcast color palette. She has an orange outfit in the first game and a white outfit in this game. You can still get the orange outfit in this game, however. The music, like the story, is dialed to 11 because we get nothing but bangers in this game. Big Band Orchestra returns and it suits every single situation, sometimes even adding suspense. However, they did dip their toes into new genres like Rock for Pudding's guitar battle. I also want to mention the Michael Jackson segment in Report 4 because I like how they would use actual instruments Michael Jackson would use, and they even have like his little acapella noises he would make, like the Who and whatnot. There's even a bit of hee in the track as well. It's amazing. There are new versions of Mexican Flyer that play throughout the game. It's played so many times it's practically became synonymous with the series overall, and it's even became the lead motif for the game as well. I love the lyrical tracks to the game. They did a good job synchronizing them in between languages. The instrumentals go hard as well. They could even classify as musical numbers. Guys, I'm telling you, listen to Purge's theme. Yes, it is the song that plays before Report 6. Yes, it's in Japanese, but there are English lyrics on the wiki page. The game's ending theme, This Is My Happiness, is such a banger. It doesn't matter which version because yes, it's been remixed. You gotta listen to it. It is such an amazing way to cap off the game. It's wonderful. Dear God. We are finally done with this segment. So where do we go next with this series? Well, in 2003, United Game Artists, the studio for the games, merged with Sega. This was at the cost of some employees leaving, including Mitsuguchi himself. Ulala shared the same fate of most Sega characters during this time, ending up in multiple spin-off and crossover games. There were attempts to create a third game specifically for Wii and Kinect. However, those ideas ended up being scrapped due to a lack of ideas and Sega's disinterest for a new entry. Despite the fact that Part 2 was a critical and financial success, Mitsuguchi, currently in Q Entertainment, proposed an idea to revive the series for HD consoles. There was a game concert in 2015 where it turns out, according to Okamura, people wished for a new entry. La La Land was an inspiration to bring it back or something. Yeah, this is what I'm getting on the Space Channel 5 VR Wikipedia page. Also, shout out to these Wikipedia pages and the Space Channel 5 wiki, by the way. They did so much help in getting research for this game, it's amazing. With these indicators in mind, what does Sega do? Well... Yep, we did end up getting a new title. Sort of. It was in the form of a VR game. I remember seeing this game when it was first announced and thought, huh, it's neat, but it's in VR. Then I never saw anything about it again until it came out, and still haven't thought anything about it. I did like the remix for the final boss, but let's not worry about that for now. Let us talk about how they put the game together. Grounding Inc., a development team of mostly ex-employees from United Game Artists, came back to develop this game. One of these people was the former staff member and Japanese voice of Ulala, Minoko Akamura. They did try to get Mitsuguchi on board, but he declined due to being busy and just allowed them to create it. Takumi Yoshinaga, the game's producer, was still working with Sega, so they were able to get the license to make a new entry. They pitched a concept of the game to Sega, who approved it and collaborated with KDDI to create a prototype. This prototype eventually became what was known as Space Channel 5 VR, Uki Uki Viewing Show. It was shown at Tokyo Game Show in 2016, receiving a positive reception. After getting that sweet, money-sucking Unity engine, they began actual production in 2018. Production actually went well due to the experience with working on the games. They tried different control schemes, like a DualShock controller, and eventually moving to the PlayStation Move. This is what they went with for the rest of production and had to tune it up, which made the synchronizing music and narrative difficult to pull off because player movement is now involved, like actual physical player movement. Another difficulty was creating environments while not making players sick from motion. They even received assistance from the VR Institute of Health and Exercise in order to add a calorie system for the potential of the game being an exercise. Game artist Yumiko Miyabe? I'm sorry for butchering that. Returned to do character artwork for the game. She once again changed the color of her outfit to yellow due to the fact she is no longer on the Dreamcast. To make Ulala visible during gameplay, the twins Ryu and Ki were created to be the player avatar. Retro Sci-Fi was retained as the art direction for the game. Modeling turned out to be a nightmare because several creators had to redo character models consistently to get them right. Some effects even had to be toned down due to frame rate drops. As for the story, it was done by Takagumi Yoshinaga. The team wanted it to have a nostalgic appeal, bringing back old characters along with adding new characters. Ryu and Ki were also created so players can admire and support Ulala during gameplay. When it comes to voice acting, all of the Japanese cast returned, but the English cast wasn't so lucky. Tom Clark Hill's Jaguar is the only person who returned. Sega had trouble finding Apollo Smile as she left the industry already. Thanks to the Space Channel 5 community, they were able to contact her. Unfortunately, she turned down reprising her role, which means they had to replace her. So Jeremy Lay was casted for the role in her place. The game got an official announcement in February 2019. A demo was available at Tokyo Game Show later that year. It was slated for a December release, but had to be delayed until spring 2020 to improve the game. It was released on PSVR on February 25th, 2020, and other VR consoles later that year. In July, it received the Hatsune Miku DLC, with the later consoles having it bundled with it. The game got a mixed reception from critics, praising the elaborate adaptation of the traditional gameplay to VR, while criticizing the lack of content. There are no sales this time, unfortunately, so we don't know if it at least sold well. However, let's not worry about that because we gotta talk about the game. Starting with the story, it begins with Jaguar finding some info and realizes it's a threat to a source of power known as Groove Moxie. Surprisingly, the game begins with a tutorial stage. Instead of Fuse, a new character called Mr. Gentle welcomes the new recruits, being the twins Ryu and Ki. Ulala then approaches and greets the newcomers and teaches them the basics of the game. After that, she receives a transmission that aliens are attacking the spaceport, so they head out in a transport, which leads to Report 1, where Ulala and the twins find themselves at a spaceport. They find that the Morolians are taking hostages once again. You know, that sounds pretty familiar. Nevertheless, this leads them to beat the Morolians at dancing and rescue the hostages. Eventually, they start blasting and they have to dodge out of the way. They run into Coco Tapioca and have to dance to avoid attacks, and shoot to counter them. This Coco Tapioca guy right here seems a little familiar. Eventually, it becomes defeated and they celebrate, with Ulala praising the twins for a good report. In Report 2, a mysterious organism praises the aliens for gathering the Groove Moxie. He gives them something to transform them into his minions. Ulala reaches the top of the spaceport when she encounters a group of white Morolians that order Ulala to hand over the Groove Moxie. Ulala is understandably surprised that an alien race known to speak an alien language spoke English to her. However, there is no time for that as she engages in a dance battle. The dance battle is hilarious as the Morolians are speaking perfect English and Ulala is genuinely confused. Eventually, they introduce themselves as the other Moros. Before the end of the dance battle, they eventually send in the other Tapiokas, other Moro versions of Coco Tapiokas. Yes, that implies there's more than one Coco Tapioka. The trio fend them off, but they fend the Coco Tapiokas off and hop on to the Space Channel 5 ship once more. Before that, Ulala declares further investigation of the other Moros. In Report 3, we get a little teaser of the 3 new members that Jaguar leads, saying it's time to make their move. Anyways, have a high-speed race against the other reporters in the middle of the asteroid field. I wonder where I've heard that one before. The space pirates also taunt them. They are here, but they also go after Channel 5 after dodging meteorites. The 3 new members introduce themselves as the Jaguars, Kel, Bello, and Soon Soon. Who names their kid Soon Soon? That sounds like a preschool show character. After fending off the space pirates, the Jaguars challenge Ulala to a dance battle. After the battle, they get ambushed by a spaceship from the last reporter, as it sucks up the Jaguars and Ulala. However, Ulala manages to toss her microphone to the twins before getting abducted. Afterwards, we get sucked in by the spaceship as well. In the final report, our main enemy is finally revealed and...
Of course, I expected no less from the Groove Moxie of the reporter who once saved the galaxy.
Now, before anybody asks about the wording of this line, according to the lore, Part 2 took place a little after Part 1. Ulala is still treated as an intermediate reporter. Don't get me wrong, this is a stupid bit of lore, since Ulala flat out exposed her corrupt CEO. I guess some dude who thinks he's Dance Jesus is more evil than a CEO who exploited and painted a whole alien race as evil for ratings. I know this is dumb, but I just want to explain to you guys what that line meant, so you won't think it's a continuity error. That tangent aside, the space organism reveals himself as Glitter, and he starts attacking the twins. That is probably the stupidest name for a villain, even for the standards of this series. Like, oh no! Watch out for Glitter! After fending off his attacks with a barrier, the reporter suggests using the mic. That doesn't work since Glitter pretty much has a black hole for her stomach. Eventually, Jaguar steps in and assists the twins by using Groove Moxie to free the other reporters, ending with everyone sending theirs to free Ulala before Glitter can slurp it up. She is freed, and they all use dance and singing to fight Glitter. He is weakened, and they all channel the power of 5 million something people in the audience to blast him to the Shadow Realm. Which they do, and it turns out Glitter was a space diva who was controlled by a space organism. Okay, that makes a little more sense, but that doesn't make the name for your main antagonist any less stupid. Instead of walking to the edge of the galaxy, they pull a 2000s animated movie and have a dance party sequence. That's it for the story. And it's just really weird. I will list some positives I have from it. I like how funny the character dialogue is. Ulala's open confusion to the other Moros speaking English, everyone's frustration and terror of Glitter's appetite, and the 5 million something line. Yes, that is an actual line Ulala says in the English version. Space Channel 5 had some funny lines of dialogue before this one, like,
Ulala, the rest is up to you. The galaxy depends on your funky moves.
I like the new characters. The Jaguars are pretty cool. Even if Soon Soon's a goofy-sounding name, the other Moros are actually kinda creepy. I think it's from their white and red color palette, because it really matches them being under the influence of a parasite. All their color being just stripped away and nothing but a mindless servant. And conceptually, Glitter is actually a pretty terrifying villain. As a space organism that can control and change the forms of others, especially the fact that he is never satisfied no matter how much it eats like actual parasites in real life. In Execution, he never really poses a threat prior to his actual encounter. Sure, we see him demonstrate what he can do to other organisms like Morolians, but that is really it. Another thing is we never see him actually eat any Groove Moxie. He says that he does so, but we never really see him actually doing it, or how he actually eats Groove Moxie. These problems somewhat dumb him down as a threat, which is what you never want to do with your antagonist, or villain for that matter. I am certain that Glitter is a victim of the story's biggest flaw. The pacing. We just have so little time with other characters besides Ulala, the Morolians, and maybe the Space Pirates. Even Pudding, the foil to Ulala, one of the most iconic rivals in the series, gets shafted to the side as a cameo. Like, she has like 1 or 2 lines, but that's it. We also just jump from one report to another, and then after 3 pretty short stages, we are already at the end. Another issue is that the mystery of what the villain is up to is messy. They start off fine with the first few levels, but then after report 1 we see how our villain created the other Moros. Then we see the other Moros afterwards, ruining any potential mystery behind them. Another issue is that the story relies too much on referencing the previous games. There is nothing wrong with having callbacks in your games. Part 2 had some of those calling back to the first game. However, it still had its own identity with its own story, new characters, new worlds, and even new concepts. This game tries to do that with having new characters, but the plot is mostly similar to the first game. Aliens terrorizing people, but it's found out that somebody is exploiting said aliens for personal gain. You could say there's a bit of part 2 involved as the main villain wants dance energy for their plan. Glitter is just purged, but now he's very hungry. Enough about me whining about a plot for a 30-minute VR title. It is about time for me to talk about gameplay. The title of the game makes it self-explanatory. It's traditional Space Channel 5 gameplay but in VR. Copy the moves of the aliens and take them down with you. However, that doesn't mean it's not unique because you actually get to copy the moves physically by using the PlayStation Move controllers. On top of that, the Move controllers have opportunities for new mechanics, which they do end up seizing, since Hey was replaced with the dance and pose mechanics. Both are also incredibly self-explanatory, as dance makes you dance and pose makes you strike different poses. Another new mechanic is the barrier, where you form a shield to protect you from attacks. This is only used on boss fights at the end of each level. Part 2 had secret moves that help get a 100% rating in each level, and it returns in VR in the form of hitting blue circles. Another returning feature from Part 2 are costumes you get from completing stages and getting 100% ratings on the stage. There are even ones from the DLC, but we will get to that later. As for post-game content, the base game has some types of things. The 100 dance battle from Part 2 comes back where the player actually plays as Ulala and copies Jaguar's moves. There is an arcade mode where it's more score-based and you won't get punished for incorrect moves. Viewing mode allows you to play the game from the third person, more like a traditional Space Channel 5 game. There is an invincibility mode where you can't lose at any point in the game. Basically an easy mode for the game, despite the fact arcade mode can also be one since you can't lose there either. Like I said, there was post-launch support for the game, surprisingly. On July 27, 2020, the game got Space 39 Miku Pack, a DLC featuring Hatsune Miku. It includes a new level accessed by arcade mode and new outfits for Ulala. The latest update to the game was hard mode, basically VR's version of the extra mode from the previous games. It includes moves from the 100-stage dance battle, and you are only allowed 3 hearts for the whole level. That is all for the gameplay actually. Let's move on to the other stuff. The visuals are my favorite part of this game. It's the perfect example of cleaning up the look while maintaining its style. The characters and environments made the jump to HD consoles, and it can make players actually feel immersed in the game's universe. The character designs are once again pretty top-notch. The color change in Ulala's outfit makes sense considering the series jumped from Dreamcast to VR. Jaguar's design in particular is the most polished one of the bunch. The other main characters may be shafted, but they look great in the new hardware as well. Unfortunately, I forgot to mention this, but is with displeasure that Hoowerg is not in the game at all. May we have a moment of silence for our favorite alien boy. I like the Jaguars and their unique outfits that match with the Space Pirate color scheme. I especially like Glitter's design. Their massive size and their jellyfish look to them makes them really intimidating. I don't know if I like the twins though, they just look a little weird to me. As for music, it's like the story as it is very nostalgia based. By that I mean the game flat out reuses some themes from previous games. Mexican Flyers are given as it's iconic to the franchise. Some tracks I found were Report 1 from Part 2, the Coco Tapioca battle from the first game, not trying to say that the game completely reuses themes, like King Kong Khan returns as a remix in the final level, and it goes so hard. It's amazing. I am forever a stan of modern music and orchestra combinations of music tracks. There are some original tracks here like the Other Moros song and the Pirate Broadcasting channel. They tap into some techno for the latter, and it surprisingly suits the sequence well, despite the games always having that retro future feel to it. Since we are here, I might as well talk about the voice acting while I'm at it. Jeremy Lay actually does a decent job as Ulala, even if she doesn't capture the same charm as Apollo's smile. She also voices the Morolians for the game, and you could probably tell it's her with a pitch filter.
Here's our chance. Let's channel the groove moxie of all 500 million something in attendance here and funnel it into one fantastic chord. You got it! Sorry, pal, but groove moxie's not... Give us your groove moxie!
Tom Clark Hill sounds like his voice is perfected as Jaguar. He isn't trying to make it deep, but he's also trying to retain the serious nature of the character.
You've done well, Channel 5. First, we need to rescue our friends. Let's shoot.
Greg Chun is the voice of Glitter, and he sounds a little unfitting. He sounds flamboyant for a ginormous and threatening space parasite. I think the Japanese voice suits him much better. Fun fact, he shares the same Japanese voice as Zero from the Mega Man X games.
俺は一体何のために戦っているんだ。質はなかなかだけど量が残念。仕方ないかしら。あなた一人しかいないから。
Which I think is pretty hilarious. Greg Chun also voices Noise. He and Fuse make a cameo during the game's credits as a voiceover, so at least we still have them. Basically, their whole in-story reason for why they're not featured in the game is because, well, they were on a business trip. Well, that ought to do it for this particular game. I am ready to finish this off because this script is at 21 pages now. It is time to discuss where this series is at now and wrap up the video. So, where does Sega go with this franchise? Nothing else was done with VR after the hard mode update. Well, for one, they decided to do another tech experiment, this time in the form of augmented reality. Space Channel 5 AR is a mobile game about seeing Ulala and the Morolians in real life and is used with KDDI's AR glass. You pretty much fend off Morolians that keep multiplying themselves. There is only a trial demo of this game so far, and work is currently still being done after the demo received positive feedback. Now, before you guys start firing shots at Sega for turning this beloved franchise into a guinea pig for new video game technology, there is another major project tied to the franchise and other media. In 2022, Sega realized the success of both Sonic movies, so they announced on the 20th of August that Space Channel 5, along with Comic Zone, will receive a movie adaptation. The synopsis of the movie is that an unhappy fast food worker will be recruited by a reporter from the future to stop an alien invasion through dancing. Yeah, I have the same feeling people had with Illumination's Mario movie after the cast got announced. I have no idea what to expect with this movie, and I'm praying to God that it won't be terrible. Besides that, there aren't many plans for Space Channel 5's future, but hardly any of these products I mentioned aren't even out, so there is no need to worry. I am a little optimistic about the series' future. They are really beginning to get experimental with this series. Plus, adding Sega's recent franchise revivals, there might be hope for perhaps a more proper sequel to the series. Let's just hope that the movie isn't completely doo-doo. After all, the Mario movie came and went to theaters mostly unscathed. Regardless, let's hope that Space Channel 5 is another shining example that Sega's forgotten franchises deserve a revival. Guys, hear me out when I say this, but I think they should cast Ryan Gosling as Jaguar. Hey fellas, thank you for watching this video through and through, because this video sure took me a while, and obviously this is my final video for the year. I do have some video ideas planned for the year, but well, for at least next year, but I'm trying to decide what should I make next, but I think I may need to take a break on videos for now, because this one was a doozy, for sure. Anyways, thank you for watching, and have a good year.